You have 4 questions on the sheet before you. Answer any 2 of them. Well, good morning. Please remember that what we are interested in is your ability to reason from the facts, and not particularly in the facts themselves. If there are any questions, you can find me in my office. Good luck.
The day of their final exams. Will they pass the test?
And what about us? Do we pass our test? Do we fall short? Can we improve? Do we measure up to the ideals of a true university?
To search for truth and teach the truth. To re-examine in the light of new knowledge what has been accepted truth. For the true knowledge is of the immutable and eternal.
A new light radiated from Greece. The spirit of inquiry was born. Socrates walked here. Plato taught here. But what was immutable? What was eternal? For nearly 1,000 years, as darkness closed in on Europe, there was no search for answers. The monastic schools, as in the cathedral schools that followed, limited knowledge was conserved by monks. But true learning was not attempted, because free inquiry, criticism, speculation did not exist. Friar Gerbert would raise his looking tube to the heavens to reaffirm an ordered mechanism, guided by a superior hand, not to question the accepted universe.
The rise of the communes in the 12th century spurred a desire for new knowledge, when men of learning sought out others to form associations of masters and scholars. The first institutions of higher learning evolved. The obstacles were great. There were no buildings in which to teach. Books, rare, handwritten, expensive, were chained to walls. Men were bound to dogma. Truth came by revelation. It was dispensed by authority and had to be taught according to doctrine. Yet, if theology was not involved, one could teach freely. Aristotle was revived, and the healing methods of the ancient Greeks, the geometry of Euclid, the astronomy of Ptolemy. As universities grew, they established formal lecture halls. Scholars from all over Europe flocked to Bologna, Paris, Padua, or Lyon. They hired their own teachers, or doctores, fixed their salaries, sternly controlled their lecture periods. At Bologna, in 1496, there enrolled as a member of the German nation, or fraternity, one Nicholas Koperling, 24 years of age. On the roof of Bologna University, with tools devised by Ptolemy 1,300 years earlier, Copernicus, the devout and timid canon from Thorin, began his computations that would profoundly change man's concept of the universe and his own place therein. Where Copernicus conjectured and kept silence, Kepler confirmed and spoke out. The cracks in the ancient cosmic edifice could now no longer be concealed. Step by step, the stage was set for a Galileo to come and tear it down. Moving from Padua, where he had taught, to Florence, he fashioned his own tools, measured, calculated, observed. With this device which I invented, he told the Duke of Medici, I enlarged the universe 100 and 1,000 times from what wise men of ages past had thought. With the writing of the dialogues, the earth-centered, walled-in universe of Ptolemy and Aristotle had come to an end. Natural and religious philosophy went their own ways. With telescope and printed book, the scientific revolution had begun. The world of thought was ready for the reasoning of a Descartes, the analytic genius of a Newton, who, with the building blocks supplied by Kepler, Galileo, and Descartes, would fit together a new image of the universe. It would listen to the voice of Provost Whichcote of King's College at Cambridge.
Truth is truth, whosoever has spoken. If this liberty not be allowed the university, wherefore do we study?
The door was open. The whole spectrum of human thought and endeavor and social organization was changing. And the university, preserver of tradition and culture, would become the spearhead of change. To search for truth and teach the truth. To examine in the light of new knowledge. What is immutable? What is eternal? Each new student generation must embark anew on that long voyage, must learn to ask and probe and find new answers. But where does one begin?
Épouser un septuagénaire. Le préféreriez-vous calme ou fougueux?
this should integrate into 1 over A, and A is 3/2, so 2/3.
不一样，对不对？所以你最常想到的事情是什么事情？
西暦で言えば1892年から1927年。
That's the way the family pride is a main factor in several of the misjudgments.
Well, what happens here?
Without a clear-cut plan, how does one choose?
Well, how do you build any structure? You start with the foundation. Here, this means the study of history, language, science. As yet, you don't ask questions.
So take this between limits, then you go from minus L to plus L, and let us get twice the answer, so that's about halfway. So what I obtain is that the final answer is that B is equal to mu 0 I over 2 pi. Then there's A, there's a 1 over A squared up there, there's A on top. So there's 1 A in the bottom surviving. So you have this, then I have L over A squared plus L squared to the 1/2. So this is then the official answer which you get.
And probably you don't quite understand the answers. But before long, you are in the midst of the stream. You find yourself challenged to relate causes and events, to interpret, to draw conclusions.
In effect, was that the American Revolution influenced the French Revolution in 2 ways. First of all, when the French gave aid to the Americans, it caused economic difficulties in France. It meant that he had to have money to raise the army, and in order to do that, he needed popular support. And to get this popular support for the Americans, and to keep the people from being rebellious, the king allowed the spread of the ideas of the American Revolution, and they became popular. And so, first of all, it brought about economic difficulties, which later helped cause the French Revolution, and secondly, it formed the intellectual basis for the revolution.
Good. What did the class think about this? Do you think he had a good point there? Do you think that he was overstretching a case, or what?
Well, there's so many possible causes for a revolution. I don't see how much...
It's your campus. You may be active in student affairs, or just mildly interested, or do nothing at all. It's up to you. You must decide your field of study. Your faculty advisor can only advise.
You have a third subject. Do you have anything in mind?
Well, I've been trying to decide between 3 courses, either a course in sociology, psychology, or another course in political science.
Come in. Sit down. Do you know what you want to do when you leave school?
Well, I'm not really sure of a particular occupation, but I do know that I want to pick now a definite major that will lead to an occupation in which I'm interested and have the ability.
Have you been to the testing service?
Yes, I have. I went when I was a freshman because I was really worried about the courses and grades and so forth, and I talked to Dr. Chaplin there, and she gave me a series of interest tests.
And the results?
Well, the results showed that primarily my interest was in the sociology field connected with psychology, and in the general area of political science and administrative and legal work.
You've been taking various subjects in this wider area. Have you narrowed down to any particular majors? You do have to declare by the end of spring quarter.
Yes, I realize that. Well, I'd like to major either in sociology or political science. You see, either one of these fields I could adapt to work after graduation or marriage, if that should happen.
For group activity, you've been listing Agnews. Is this still work at the mental hospital?
No, I've changed from working at the mental hospital to the juvenile hall in San Mateo, and I really enjoyed this work. This has been the primary reason that I'm interested in the sociology field.
Now, as for the third subject, you've been considering sociology, crime and the criminal. I can see why you're interested, but this course will come again and you can take it later. As for political science, you already have 2 subjects in this, but haven't done any work in psychology. Wouldn't it be better to take this so that you don't close the door on an entire area without exploring it?
That sounds fine. I will take psychology.
Fine, I'll put down psychology then. Your study card, and if you do need to change the subject later, come back.
Fine, I will. Thank you.
You probably want to continue the courses you've started.
Yes, I do.
Is Western Civilization 5 units again?
No, it's only 4 this quarter.
And you're taking Chinese. Do you like it?
Very much, yes. As I go along, I like it more and more. People always ask me when I sit down to learn them, how can I do it? And it is difficult because when you start, there's just a scramble of lines that don't mean anything, and you really can't figure out quite how to approach it. But when you get through, you know what they mean, and you can write them, and you can even understand them. I really am enjoying this language.
You want to keep on with it then?
Very definitely.
You don't have to declare a major until next year, but if you should decide to major in Chinese, you might be interested in a wonderful new program we have. A 3-year Master of Arts for students who want to teach Chinese in college. You enter the program as a junior, and 1 year would be at a university in the Far East.
This sounds like a marvelous program. But I'm not certain I want to go into teaching. What I want to do now is to learn Chinese, and to learn it so well that I can use it as I use English in whatever field I choose to go into. I have a feeling that the world is opening up, and that very soon we in this country will need many people who have a working knowledge of Chinese and a knowledge of another field. Now, I know this sounds sort of idealistic about the world and everything, but I do feel that if I combine Chinese with, say, economics or some other field, I will be preparing myself properly.
This is fine. You know where you're going. Your study card, and in case you should decide to teach Chinese, this describes the program.
Thank you very much.
金的价钱最贵的是什么？
价钱最贵的是金。
石头硬，木头比石头软。
比石头软。
用木头做的东西叫什么？
用木头做的东西叫。
Why do you go to a university? To train for a better job? Or to be a more useful member of society?
Who is it, please?
Stanford volunteer?
Come in. Pull the gate towards you.
What is a university for? Where is this university going? Now you do have questions, and criticism, and perhaps some misgivings. One issue may be important, another trivial. But there is time to discuss them, and people willing to discuss them with you, and answer your questions.
Well, I guess I can start it pretty easily. Things have been on our mind, Dr. Wirt. Why is the tuition going up next year?
I think one has to look at this in terms of tuition and the whole expenditure and income sources of private universities particularly. Stanford, like other private universities, has had great difficulty, to put it mildly, in keeping pace with increased costs, particularly since World War II. About 40 to 50% of income in all private colleges and universities is derived from student tuition. And obviously, when student tuition is this much of the income source, it has to be raised if a university is fighting to keep pace with increased costs.
I don't think there's anyone here among us that isn't happy that they're here at Stanford. However, we think that there are a few things that can be improved. And one of the things in particular is the relationship between the individual students here and the faculty. Maybe it's perhaps the dorms are too large, or the faculty program with the faculty associates or resident associates could be changed or improved. What do you think?
One problem we have here at Stanford is trying to break down the division between what happens in the classroom and what happens in the dormitory. The dormitory should not be a place that you go to sleep or sleep it off. We're talking about trying to merge the intellectual life of the dormitory with that of the classroom.
It's just that I think in a way, especially with freshmen coming here, everything is so new. They're nervous. There are a lot of things that they have to do to get adjusted. I think the faculty associate program could be one way in which they could alleviate some of this tension or nervousness. And I was just wondering, could the faculty associates on their own part come out and try to make the obvious step to make the students more at ease?
The faculty associate is just a man who's sworn to break bread with you. We're talking about a different group, the entire faculty. So what's that noise?
Haven't you heard about that? That goes on about 4 times a day as well.
In which they live. Noise seems to take priority over studying, and there's no privacy. The corridors are pretty close to a prison, really. Now, why can't you use the suite system in future houses for 2, 4, or 6 students, create more privacy, and break up the house more so that it is a more interesting place to live in?
I'd like to add on.
Just a minute, yes?
I'd like to add on that I was wondering whether the plans for the future structures and for the remodeling of the previous, or these buildings we have now, will be made available to the students for their comment and criticism.
Well, let me respond to the last question first. Typically in the design of dormitories, residence halls, or the student union, which has been under design for the last 2 years, students have been represented on design committees. Now let me turn my attention to the first question. Unless a philanthropist with a great deal of money should show up, as Mr. Harkness did at both Harvard and Yale, it's unlikely that Stanford will ever be able to afford residence halls of the character of those at Harvard or Yale. But being Californians, I think we pride ourselves on being able to make the best of what we have. And perhaps Stanford, over the next few years, as we raise money in a capital campaign, can arrive at new plans, at new ways to convert residence halls into an academic focus and accomplish as much as perhaps our Eastern sister institutions have with less money.
Dr. Wirt, we as undergraduates hear a lot about such projects as linear accelerators and radio propagation work, and yet at the same time have classes in dingy corners of Quad and classes given by teaching assistants. I wonder if any of the new funds that will be coming into Stanford will be used specifically for the undergraduate program.
Practically all of the components in the campaign have some general effect on the undergraduate program. For example, some 15 endowed professorships will be included as components. These professors, following the tradition of the Stanford faculty, will undoubtedly teach courses to undergraduates and to graduate students as well.
Now that we're on the subject of undergraduate education, I'd like to talk about something that all of us are interested in, undergraduate education for women. This school has a famous ratio, many more men students to women. And I think sometimes the courses, the activities, the cultural opportunities are geared more to the men students here than they are to the women.
What do you want, courses in dishwashing?
No, I don't think so, but some of the math and science courses, for example, are geared more to the guys who are interested in engineering rather than to the woman who wants a good background, but not a detailed study
Well,
of...
now you're arguing then that there should be a separate educational curriculum for women as opposed to men. Is that right? Well, do you believe it or don't you?
No. No.
Well...
Don't you think there's an added emphasis today on the woman as, well, it sounds kind of trite, but the problem of a woman who wants both a career and a home.
How can she find happiness?
I don't know.
No, I don't think this is funny, but I don't think that we're going to find pat answers that dictate a curriculum to us. Women have the choice. They can be mothers, and there are problems here because a woman has her last child by the time she's 26 on the average, so for most of her life she's not going to have kids at home. Or they can be glamour girls, and here the problem is she gets old. Or she can have a career, but if she has a career, our society disparages her unless she is married. And if she's married, we insist that the career should not interfere with marriage and so on. Well, faced with this very difficult situation, Stanford, like most universities of high quality, tries not to have separate courses in home economics, separate courses on how to manage the family budget, and instead says, look, we don't know what's going to happen to you. We're going to give you the broadest possible education. And then you'll be not fit perfectly for anything, but able to hold your own.
Everything we've discussed so far boils down to three basic problems. One being the geographical isolation of Stanford University per se.
Well, I don't quite understand how you can say geographical isolation when Stanford is one of the few universities that has 3 campuses abroad in Europe.
I'd like to extend this question of the Stanford campuses abroad and also the emphasis on learning and not studying. Why is it that the courses that are given abroad are fairly often geared just to the general knowledge of the course and not to what can be gained from taking this course in this specific country?
You've got to recognize Stanford has a peculiar problem. They are trying to do this kind of operation on the biggest scale of any university in the United States. This is not something at which we are going to do for an elite group among our students, but about 1 out of every 3 students is going to get overseas. On this basis, we want to have a program that appeals and can appeal to all kinds of students. Sure, we could have courses in Romanesque architecture, which would appeal to students in the humanities. But we must also try to bring this opportunity to the students in the physical sciences and engineering. Now, they have difficulty in working in the overseas program under the best of circumstances. We must therefore provide them with comparable courses such that the courses they take over there will be the equivalent in knowledge as well as title of what they would get were they to take these courses back on the farm.
Then you're saying that, for instance, a Psych 1 course over there would be far more valuable than a course in psychology geared to the psychology, say, of the German people or the Italian people or the French people, where you can apply this knowledge.
2 problems. First of all, I didn't say that the Psych 1 course would be more valuable. I said we have a problem of recruitment. We must recognize that we must recruit the students for the foreign campuses. And it's that part of the problem which I was addressing myself to.
Oh, sure, these minor deficiencies do exist over there, but most of the students come back so impressed with the valuable experience they find all sorts of deficiencies on the Stanford campus.
In fact, they feel that students themselves and faculty are not taking advantage of the cultural things that there are here.
It seems to me that an even more basic problem is that we just never have time to think. We're faced with final examinations every 10 weeks, and a great many of the courses have 2 and 3 midterms in the course of a quarter. And we never have time to sit down and organize our thoughts or do any of the more basic background reading that I'd like to do.
Now, how can we alleviate these problems, especially the pressure angle?
Well, who's putting on this pressure? Are we putting it on you, or are you putting it on yourself?
Yes, I feel that the university is putting it on the students, specifically by the quarter system.
Well, go ahead.
And I think that one of the main problems that exist here is that there's a tremendous pressure on the students. And in a result of this pressure, it's impossible to take advantage of both the cultural and the academic opportunities that exist here on the campus.
They don't have time to read new novels or something new that's come out in an entirely different field, to go to the opera or to attend lectures on campus. And not only that, when they can make spare time, they're under a continuous pressure to compete with their fellow students. And I don't think that this is what a university is for.
We spend so much time booking, as it's commonly phrased, learning things quickly in a quarter's time, in 8 weeks' time for a midterm, 3 weeks, and then for a final in 5
Do we
weeks.
tell you that the grades are that important, or is it that the school systems from which you came and the pressure to get into college make you so concerned with these things that you put this pressure on us?
Couldn't we work out some kind of a system of comprehensive examinations at the end of the year?
We might even have courses much like senior colloquia where students did just independent study and research as an elective sort of course so that they could broaden their horizons.
You've asked so many questions there, and I'm not sure I could give you adequate answers if I had the balance of the evening. As far as I can tell, there isn't a really good college or university in America that has solved the problem of how to cope with a different kind of student body than these institutions have been used to in the past. The character of the student body at Stanford, at leading liberal arts colleges, has changed markedly over the last 5 years. The students are more highly motivated, This is true at Stanford. It's true, as near as I can tell, universally in selected colleges, and they have more ability or academic potential. During the next year, we will study intensively each of the problems that you have alluded to, and hopefully some very satisfactory resolutions will be made.
Stanford is dedicated to the proposition that a university is more than a trade school. We're trying to train you for life, not for a specific job. In a world that's changing as swiftly as this one, instead of fitting you to this society, we're trying to fit you to any conceivable society. But for now, your job is to go to bed and be ready for tomorrow. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
A pair of 4s electrons and a
pressure.
3d electron.
The hemoproteins include the
ion scandium 3+ clearly resemble the ion aluminum 3+.
Now you see you have the book open in front of you. You can look up the formula and you have it. But let's say you don't remember exactly how the eggs end or what the log is or exactly where the terms come from.
Well, I think she is responsible for it.
It's all a matter of duty. How far are you going to carry this duty?
Sure, you can't foresee. You can't foresee the scales are going to fall. You can't foresee that the fact's going to be knocked out of the man's hand. But it's
entirely different conditions prevail. No insulating cover retains the heat, and consequently the magma cools rapidly. Also, the pressure has been relieved, and with loss of cover and pressure,
together by covalent bonds can be represented by Lewis formulas, and these can be guessed by octet rules, leading to standards of existing statutory standards, and proves the generality of the Solomonic standards for application to foreign
using proper methods, propaganda techniques which appeal to the worst in men.
Clarity of mind and an objective approach to any problem are basic characteristics of humanism. Clarity of mind.
But the chromatin duplication proceeds from one of these divisions, the first, and the central rolling divides.
Clarity of mind. Clarity of mind. Clarity of mind. Clarity of mind.
How about practicing our spring sing? We should do that, okay? No, stay where you are. Stay where you are. Have you all learned your words? Yeah. Okay, you're getting your words all wrong. Pete, how do you pronounce this?
That's Al-Merchavim.
Al-Merchavim. Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. My grandfather was a rabbi.
All right, let's get in formation and try it.
Okay.
All right, will the sopranos get in the first 7, 8.
place to learn, a place to talk, a place to think.
A stone, a leaf, an unfound door. Of a stone, a leaf, a door. And of all the forgotten faces, naked and alone, we came into exile. In her dark womb, we did not know our mother's face. From the prison of her flesh have we come into the unspeakable and incommunicable prison of this earth. Which of us has known his brother? Which of us has looked into his father's heart? Which of us has not remained forever prison pent? Which of us is not forever a stranger and alone? O waste of loss, in the hot mazes lost, among bright stars on this most weary, unbright cinder, lost. Remembering, speechlessly, we seek the great forgotten language, the lost laying end into heaven. A stone, a leaf, an unfound door. Where? When? O lost and by the wind grieved ghost, come back again.
Now we will go to reading lesson number 26, page 110. It says, this is a story about Galileo. Those of you who will go to Florence will see his house there. As you know, Galileo proved the theory of heliocentrism. From him we know that the whole universe does not turn around us, even though some of us are still slow to accept this. Let's read it. La scienza moderna incomincia con Galileo Galilei, fondatore del metodo sperimentale scientifico. Egli fu illustre matematico. Fisico e
And finally, San Miniato is so important for being a fortress that during the famous siege of 1530 was compelled to have Michelangelo here to help him build its barricades and bastions.
Meno una volta. Lei pensa che una volta in vetta bisogna andare?
Sì, come si dice, ferrovia.
Sì, va sulla ferrovia. Generalmente i treni in Italia vanno sulle ferrovie, sì. In America i treni no.
non vanno tutte le persone, tutta un'altra cosa, i treni americani, tutta un'altra cosa. Sente Kennedy, ma l'automobile allora?
Vous avez une succession d'actions dans le passé et en plus vous avez un récit. Donc 3 raisons bien définies pour employer le passé simple.
Oui, c'est vrai, mais je pense parce que la française...
Bitte, wie war das mit den Präpositionen? Let's repeat this. In, an, auf, vor, hinter, unter, über, neben, zwischen. Ich frage wo, dann Dativ. Ruhe. Ich frage wohin, dann Akkusativ. Verben der Bewegung, motion. You understand? Thank you.
The program of Giustizia and Libertà was made known here in Italy through a clandestine publication which was circulated in Italy during the fascist regime, and more particularly in the last years of the regime, especially during the war. Because one of the main functions of the Partito d'Azione, which was a small party made mainly of teachers, university professors, writers, intellectuals, was the one of discussing, of presenting certain ideas to the country.
Spengler was an obscure German high school teacher who, with the publication of his opus, The Decline of the West, in 1917, was suddenly catapulted into international celebrity.
Around 1000 AD, Spengler believed a respect for the people, or as Spengler called them, the smelly proletariat, as well as a respect for the merchant or bourgeois or capitalist class, replaced, in his opinion, a respect for the true racial aristocracy who ought to rule the masses. This, he says, is the fundamental sign of decay, a sign which he believes appeared in Chinese culture, in Indian culture, and in Egyptian culture in exactly the same form. The only hope for mankind in this last stage, Spengler argued, is the coming of what he called Caesarism. To quote Spengler directly, the coming of Caesarism breaks the dictatorship of money and its political weapons of liberalism and democracy. The sword is victorious over money. Decline of the West became a classic work in the Weimar Republic, but it also sold hundreds of thousands of copies in England and in America. Spengler's position can be regarded as a fitting prelude to the Nazi regime.
The choice before the German people was really one between nationalism and liberalism. The nationalism about which we are talking, and the book contains a few remarks about this, is a nationalism which was fused with romanticism. And therefore, this nationalism was one which contained a great number of irrational, anti-rational elements. And this, of course, was reflected in education. And this, as I have indicated a number of times, was particularly evident in the character of German student associations, particularly those that went around with little cappies, little sashes, the colors of the fraternity, and that engaged in dueling as a show of manliness. Now here then were future intellectual leaders created in the universities, dedicated when it came to matters of their own society and the world, dedicated to a certain type of irrationalism. And of course this affected particularly their political attitudes. And this is what makes it interesting to us. This then were the people who emerged into social and political leadership, and who are still social and political leaders during the Weimar Republic. These people you found in ministries, in the schools as professors, in education therefore, in the courts, and so forth. And they, of course, were not the type of human material on which a solid democracy could be built.
Aha, da ist noch ein Fehler. Dann bitte froh zu sein noch einmal. In 2 Teilen jetzt. Bitte noch einmal zum Schluss, dann nehmen wir das Essen. 4-mal jeder. Bitte jetzt. Froh zu sein, froh zu sein, froh zu sein, froh zu sein, froh zu sein.
Avec mes sabots d'ondaine, la la la, avec mes sabots. Vis 3 voyageurs en peine avec mes sabots. Vis 3 voyageurs en peine avec mes sabots. Je leur montrai le chemin de la plaine avec mes sabots d'ondaine, la la la, avec mes sabots.
Guten Tag. Was finden Sie? Ich möchte eine Lampe, eine Handellampe kaufen.
Ach, Herr Kingfish,
verstehen Sie?
Kommen Sie einmal.
Sandy.
Well, hi.
Great to see you. What can we do for you?
Pal, we need a flashlight battery.
Flashlight
you know
battery.
what it is?
Oh, just a sec. I've got a book. Moment.
Possibly some kind of lampe?
Ja. Oh. Haben Sie Ihre Taschenlampe Batterie?
Nein, wir sind doch eine Drogerie. Aber Sie können so etwas kaufen hier. Bei Elektroböhmen. Man geht da ein Stück links bis zur Marktstraße und dann gleich auf der rechten Seite sehen Sie ihn schon.
Oh gut, danke schön.
Ja, bitteschön.
Avete che vanno preso la
Quanto costa quello? Faccio 1300, visto?
1300, oh, forse per 1000 lire.
Piace? Tutto lavorato a mano questo.
Sì, lo so.
Fatto la treccia, il cuscito.
Mi piace molto, ma...
Forse l'originale fiorentino?
1200?
Facciamo 1200, visto?
Ah, va bene.
Mais si le voyage s'entraîne avec mes sabots.
Nouveaux francs.
37 nouveaux francs.
37 nouveaux francs.
Ça fait 3700 francs.
3700 anciens francs.
Cher, nous sommes étudiants,
Je comprends très bien, mais moi je peux pas.
Râpé. Un ascon. Non, pourquoi? Pour les pauvres étudiants.
Mais non, mais je peux pas.
Oh, dear.
Ouais.
Allons, Dave. Ne vous pas. Oui, oui. Merci, monsieur. Merci mille fois. Et bon fête, bon fête. Oh, that's too bad, because I really like that.
want to park in the dark, sit there holding hands, you're so square. Baby, I don't care. You don't like hot rod races or driving late at night. You just want to park in the dark, sit there holding tight, you're so square. Baby, I don't care. You don't know any dance steps that I do. You just know how to make me laugh, you like do, 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 do. Wonder why my heart beats, I only know it does. I wonder why I love you, baby. Well, I guess it's just because you're so square. Baby, I don't care. Baby, I don't care. Baby, I don't care. Baby, I don't care. If you get there, that's all I do. Coming for to carry me home.
Could you just wait a minute while I finish this reading? All right, now, what's on your mind?
I've been talking to some of your graduate students about the kind of research you do here, and I think I'd like to give it a try.
All right, just let me take another reading, and then we can go upstairs and talk this over. Come in, please. And sit down. I can tell you maybe a little bit about what we have been doing. There are two main groups of experiments we are concerned with. One has to do with nuclear reactions, and the other is connected with beta decay. Now, in detail, what we're doing is we're investigating the energy level of your beam tube would be over here, and we'll put your beta spectrometer right here. I think that won't be too close to the wall, although it's pretty cramped there. Incidentally, before we go downstairs, I wanted to ask you this. The problem you're going to work on is a very difficult one. Are you willing to spend about 2 years on it or so?
Yes, I am.
I see. Well, then let's go downstairs and take a look at the setup. This would be your beam tube here. These are the energy stabilizing slits for the Van de Graaff.
We inquire into the structure of living matter.
Teddy, look at this one.
Oh, that looks good. What's the final magnification?
The final magnification's about 250,000 there.
So this is about 1 millimeter across the molecule. That's about 100 angstroms.
That's right.
It looks like it's in better focus over here.
Yeah, that's...
Examine the properties of inert materials.
How should it change when you boil?
Well, it seems to me just give us more information on the...
Yeah, but how do you expect the characteristics to change?
Well, let's see, decrease.
Well, I don't think I agree with that. When you take off the thin layer, you should eventually end up with the thick layers only, so you get a high breakdown.
We shed critical light on our social institutions.
If the public school has as one of its major objectives giving a common experience to the children of all of the people, and it is the only institution which exists nationally for this commonality of experience, then what happens when the federal government deliberately uses its money in such a manner that it encourages the creation of many diverse schools, private, which then do not contribute to this national purpose of commonality of experience. Now, let's hear you argue this one way or the other.
Well, is commonality of experience more important than caliber of education, even if it's only for the immediate case? Should the private school that is putting out a superior caliber of education to many of the public schools be in any less a position to get public funds?
We were told in class just today about a couple, a mixed couple that went down the peninsula to get something to eat. They went into one of the better restaurants, and they waited in their booth for 3 hours before they were served. I wondered if anything like this had happened to you, perhaps around here or the peninsula.
Nothing as obvious as that, but something else did happen to me when I first came here to Stanford. I was taking a psychological survey test during pre-reg week, and one of the questions that I came to on this test really stopped me and started me thinking. It was, how do you feel about Negroes? And it had 3 answers: like, dislike, indifferent.
What was your answer?
How would you have answered?
It seems to me that that would depend on the individual. When I meet a person and then when I get to know them, I don't think of them as being black or white. I think of them as an individual, a friend. There are Negroes who I don't like and there are whites who I don't like. But I don't dislike them because they are Negro or because they are white. It's because they don't appeal to me as individuals. It's the individual and how my personality fits his is what forms my likes and dislikes, not the color of his skin.
Brett, you said something just a little while back. You said, when I see someone, when I first see someone. Then you later said, when I get to know him. But you didn't make any distinction. Now, it seems to me when you first see someone, when anyone first sees somebody, then they have to immediately in their mind go through a process that calls upon, the only thing that you have to go on at first is physical appearance. And there it is, right staring you in the face. You see a Negro person, automatically you have to say, this person is Negro, or this person is Japanese. Even myself, I think this is a universal thing.
Well,
wait a minute. Would you guys have a Negro in your fraternity? Would you?
Well, personally, it wouldn't be a matter of whether to have a Negro in the fraternity. It'd be more of a matter of whether this fellow met the same requirements as any other fellow that came around and was desirous of entering the fraternity. It may enter my mind as far as getting along with the other guys in the house, but for me personally, I just assumed if he was the same caliber of fellow as anyone else, it wouldn't make any difference to me.
To change the subject a bit, Joel, I know many people who don't like Jewish persons in their organizations because they say that Jews have an inferiority complex and compensate by wanting to run the show. Could you comment on that?
No, I've heard the criticism before sometimes, and I personally could apply it to individuals. I don't think I could apply it to a group. Given the fact that Jews are in a minority, I think you might be justified in saying that you could expect to find among some of them inferiority complexes, but I don't think it characterizes the group any more than it would characterize any other group.
Hello, Mel.
Good morning, Bob.
I have a little job here for you, Mel.
This is quite a project.
How long do you think it'll take you to get it done, Mel?
Oh, I'd say about 2 weeks at the most, Bob. I have a job right now, which I'm doing, but...
We try to comprehend.
The game is that you have
How does a child learn?
pictures go together or whether they don't go together. If you think they go together, you press this button. If you think they don't go together, you press this button. Are you all ready to begin, Michael? Good. All right. Here's the first one coming up. That's right. You see, as soon as the light goes on, I take the pictures out and put some new ones in. Oh, you find these very easy, don't you?
How do people work together?
You're going to be working together as a group. You're working against time. In each of the cubicles in which you're sitting, you will find 5 envelopes labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Will you check to see that you have them? All right, now put them back. Now when I say go, you will take the envelope labeled 1, open it, and take out the plastic pieces that are in it. As quickly as you can, assemble those pieces into a square. Now they may not form a square. If not, then you may exchange pieces with any one of the other 4 members in the group until you get pieces that will allow you to make a square. Your task will be over when each of you has a square in front of himself, all of the same color, and there are no pieces left over. Now when I say go, open envelope 1, and good luck. Go.
Well, we all hold them up in the air so we can see what we got here.
Who's got a green square? Does anybody have a
I
square?
got a blue here. Oh, well.
I've got a green, but it isn't.
Do you have a blue?
Yeah, I got a blue.
Start passing around that way.
Okay, give me something.
Pass one at a time when you pass.
I have all blues here.
Why do people go to war?
My question is, what can computers do to help us out?
Well, what is the purpose of this project of yours?
We're trying to find out how wars get started, for one thing, and also how small wars are enlarged into great wars, how they escalate from a small beginning into a worldwide conflict.
Well, have most wars started from small ones into big ones?
Well, it's difficult to say where a war starts because there is always conflict inherent in any international situation. Well, we've been gathering data from a number of different conflict situations, some of which resulted in war and some of which did not. For example, we've been looking at the Bosnian crisis of 1908, which did not result in war. We've been looking at the 1914 crisis with many of the same actors involved, which did end in war.
Well, what makes you think that computers will help? I mean, offhand, I wouldn't think this was a computer problem.
Well, our problem is this, that we have literally thousands of individual perceptions of various kinds, goals, stated goals, and decisions of various kinds, some more intense, some less intense. Now this becomes a great manpower problem. How do you handle all of these?
Oh, I just didn't realize you had so many data.
Thousands of items. And it's in this framework, I suppose, that we ask you, well, can computers help us?
Well, it seems obvious to me that machines can certainly do the mechanics of the processing. They can sort, organize, select, correlate. They can also run through simulations. I would say you probably can, but my experience has been that the demands of the computer for detail of your model may be more than you're prepared to deliver. Have you really thought through exactly how the various items combine?
Well, it seems to me there's a kind of analogy here, and I'm speaking very much as a layman. We do have a kind of circuit set up.
I don't know. It seems to me there is a certain legitimacy behind the Soviet Union. At least that is what Stalin claimed. Mr. Parker, isn't it true? There was, for a long time, there was no other socialist country except the Soviet Union.
Well, his main contention, I think, was that since the Soviet Union had succeeded in its revolution 30 years or so before anybody else and had had this experience, that the Soviet Union should serve as a model for these other countries. That it was actually farther along on the road to ultimate communism than anybody else was.
Yes. If you go back to Soviet ideology, you will discover there are certain stages of development which are bound to happen, the final stage being the stage of communism.
This is why we differentiate, I think, between Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union. It seems to me that you could speculate.
Where does this country stand in the world?
Well, this is what I want to talk about. Countries which take a lot of foreign aid from you and then not only see eye to eye with you on foreign policy, but who pursue an entirely different foreign policy and who very often rap you on the knuckles for what they think are your mistakes. Now, what do you people really feel about it? Do you feel extremely annoyed? Do you feel, for example, that it's immoral, unethical
to take our aim?
Because I can understand it on the psychological plane, you know. I mean, here we are pouring money in a way in which no other nation in world history has done, but having so few friends.
It seems to me that in a country like Yugoslavia, for instance, this giving aid to the Yugoslavs and also having them receive the same aid from Russia, it seems to me they're playing a very sly game and perhaps getting a huge horse laugh on us if they can continue the policy. It seems all to their benefit. I think we're just being taken for suckers, so to speak. And
you're trying to say that the only way, for example, we can develop, say, in the Western way, is to develop in exactly the same way.
Here's interesting. I'm saying we should see, first look to the country, see if we can ask them to support us. For example, in Thailand, perhaps there'd be no problem there. We can attach strings there.
Sure.
But if we go to Guinea or Nigeria or someplace like this, I think it's foolish to attach strings.
What I am saying is that the United States, in its judgment of whether a country is neutral or not, cannot really afford to say anything about the domestic government. It must judge purely on the basis of foreign policy.
It's wrong, and I say we're going to do it next year.
International relations are a vital concern of students.
They're willing to work, and they've worked out on World University service. There's no reason why they can't help us out with
I've just been reading over this report from Tokyo. How many of these students are going to have graduate work, going to do graduate work when they come back?
Oh, I think as far as I know, all the majors of our department, that is the Department of Asian Languages, will go on with their graduate work, and there possibly may be a few others.
Well, that's fine. We're going to have lots of Japanese experts. What I really wanted to talk to you about, Wing, is doing the same thing in Chinese. How do we stand in Taipei?
Now, when the government had these categories of land, it did not run a farm by itself. It sent sometimes soldiers to work on the land. It sometimes employed laborers or condemned convicts to work on the land. That is true. But in the main, the government rent the land out. Consequently, you have, again, the village head and the accountants and the clerks in the city hall making tricks on the commutation. And the classification varies from one county to another.
You have more and more dead weight.
But science won't be idle during this period in other fields, and while this is happening, other things may be happening too to solve the problem.
There is an ultimate limit on what the world can produce in terms of food. And no matter all our ingenuity, will not exceed this certain limit, and perhaps we have to measure it in terms of the radiant energy reaching us from the sun. But eventually, this will be reached. Harvard Symposium, I'd be particularly interested to hear about Hurwitz's work that was reported there on the messenger RNA. What sorts of primers did he use? Did he use a synthetic polynucleotide, some of Kornberg's poly-AT as a primer? What did he get from that?
Yes, he, I believe, tested some of Kornberg's DNA as a primer, the AT, a polymer, and obtained the comparable RNA. He also observed very little net synthesis under the conditions he performed his experiments.
Now, how did it come out last night with the one that you ran on our newest fraction? Is that one's still being developed? Ah, there it is. Yeah.
When I use this as a guide to determine where to cut the section out of the rest of the gel.
In order to extract the enzyme.
Yes, and did the assays to find out what type of recovery we had with our polymerase and with the contaminating enzyme.
Yeah.
These are the results that I found.
So you find 4.5% of the synthesizing activity in the eluted fraction, and just about the same amount of degrading activity. So here again we see that we have failed to separate these two activities, if indeed they're separable. So we must decide now whether to pursue this tack. And what's your feeling, Charles? Do you think they have the same enzyme, or?
Before starting the anesthesia, it's essential that you check the machine very carefully and that you're quite familiar with it. It's too late to find something wrong once you've started.
The test dose of pentothal has produced no unexpected effect, so we'll go ahead with the induction dose now. Now, the most important thing on applying the mask is to do it without allowing any leaks around it and without obstructing the patient's airway. Now, lift up the chin and look at the breathing bag to see that it is moving as much as it should compared with the patient's breathing. Another way to check that the breathing is not obstructed is to listen to the sound it makes through the tubing. A nice hollow sound when it's clear.
Ready to nurse.
I'd like you to come down and look at the final setup now, if you have time.
Well, let's go downstairs. Maybe I'll just put my books in the office and then I'll meet you downstairs.
The beam comes through this tube and passes through this valve. Attached to it is a cold trap, which traps carbon-bearing gases and keeps them away from the target. This is a motor which moves a pair of slits up and down to compensate for the changing magnetic field.
Oh, this looks really very good. Why don't we go to the control board and check it out?
Well, glad to see you. I understand you have some questions to ask me, and I've got some I'd like to ask you.
Good. Why don't you start with yours?
Me first?
Yeah.
All right. Now, you're mostly seniors, aren't you?
Well, I'm just a sophomore.
Oh, Scotty's just a sophomore.
And I'm in the law school.
Well, that gives us a spread. Perhaps it'll be easier. The thing I have in mind really is this. We talk a lot about the objectives of education, and sometimes one gets the sense that we're talking platitudes. And you can help us to find ways to bring what we say into effect, instead of having it stand as a sort of an empty generality.
Yes, I think this is what a lot of us are concerned about, too. I know many of us ask questions, particularly towards this. How is it that we can bring the intellectual framework that we get in formal classroom training closer together with the simple act of caring about things that are beyond our own daily lives?
Well, one way you can relate it is through your career, but I take it you're talking about something broader than that.
Oh, yes, very much so. I think, well, we could imagine Scotty here as being a student who might be only passively reacting to the life at the university around him. And this would be quite a different Scotty from the Scotty who goes to class, certainly, and studies and does his work, but not only what he does in class, but what he does out of class gives him a feeling that everything counts. And
Excuse me, Dave, but I think you're addressing yourself to the question of how a student channels is concerned. And before we get to the question of how a university channels the concern of students in proper directions, I think we first have to consider how a university is to develop concern in those students who arrive at school knowing not what they're going to study, what they're going to do, and who haven't developed for themselves a personal set of values.
These two things, John, I think are bound to go together. You're quite right. But you can't really talk about concerns without being bothered or without paying attention to the particular things you're concerned with. So the problem is how to develop some kind of enthusiasm, some kind of engagement in the student, and also to develop some kind of critical ability so that he will be interested in things that are worthwhile rather than the things that are trivial.
We'll take Arts Africa Desk, for example.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I hope the Africa Desk contributes in two ways to the things we've been talking about. One, in allowing students to express their concern in an active way. by contributing to African-American relations and understanding, but I hope it also can contribute in another way. And this is by the fact that if it is an exciting and meaningful program, this itself will encourage other students to become involved.
This is right, but there have to be two things. There has to be the interest and also the willingness to discipline it so as to make it effective, because undisciplined interest is of very little value. But at the same time, one has to encourage the kind of idealism that this represents, because without it, I believe a free society would soon die.
What you mean then is idealism that is critical, that teaches us how to think.
When you speak of getting them to think, I think you're putting your finger on something which is very central to the whole discussion, because this is the university's mission of developing in the student a concern for improving his own knowledge, self-examination. This is the concern we want: intellectual honesty, responsibility, not speaking without knowing, some trust in the value of careful, critical thought.
I think an example of this is our present national situation, where we have a reputation as being a fairly complacent nation, satisfied with our material wealth. And one of the reasons for this, I think, is that as a nation, we really don't have concern.
Concern for what?
Well, certainly not just to earn $18,000 a year in security. I mean, with all the crises in the world today, it seems to me there's a clear call for excellence and leadership to the world. If we really are concerned about freedom, it's time to stand up and be counted.
Well, Scotty, I think this concern is so important to students that it frequently will determine how they spend their lives, how they shape their lives. And if Stanford is going to produce students or develop students that can make any contribution to society, it has to foster on the campus an atmosphere where students think and examine that which is of value and determines what they will do. And this determination has to be made now.
But it's not just intellectually deciding what kind of, what I'm going to believe in and what I'm going to act on. It's creating the habit of acting on these things you believe in. If a student won't act as a student, there's a good danger that he won't be concerned with the world around him as an adult or as somebody in the business or governmental post.
Yes, and if we're going to have a university where thought and action can become one, and where we can begin to train the leaders that Scotty spoke of, certainly we're going to have an administration, I should think, which will have the courage of its convictions and which will make decisions, though unpopular today, which will be right 50 years from now.
Dr. Rhinelander, how much will Stanford do?
Well, I'm sure it will try to do everything it can. I'm also sure that no matter how much we succeed in doing, there will still be more improvement to be made. One of the things that I think is exciting about Stanford is the sense that improvement is needed, and we are anxiously seeking it. As to the central things you've been talking about, the problems directly of education, I would have to say simply that the job is principally yours, because while we can point you the way, we can't save you the journey.
All of them have been accelerated by Van de Graaff, and some of these positively charged particles have been accelerated by cyclotrons. Now, some of you may ask, what's all this good for? Here I can only say that we as scientists search for the truth. That is, we are trying to search out nature. We are trying to see what phenomena nature presents to us, and we investigate them, and we feel that this investigation in itself is our goal, quite independent of the applications which may follow therefrom later on.
When I traveled through India a few years ago, I asked one of the very great sages, an old man in yellow gown, at the foothills of the Himalayas, what is truth? How can we grasp truth? He looked at me very long. Then he laughed and said, you cannot grasp truth. Truth grasps you. But how can we understand the truth, I said? Is it not possible rationally, intellectually to formulate it? And then his forehead clouded up somehow, and he said, no, you're talking on the lower level. It is nothing as mediocre and as small as that. Truth is that light of which you and I and all things are but the shadow. You would not assume that the shadow could influence powerfully the light, grasp it. It doesn't. It is the light that influences the shadow. This was his answer.
thou, Galileo? Knowest thou the reasons for which thou hast been summoned before this holy office?
Yes, I believe I do. My book, the Dialogues.
Is this the book?
It is.
Concerning those conjectures that the sun is stationary and earth in motion, wast thou not admonished some years ago that such opinions, considered as established facts, were contradictory to Holy Scripture and therefore inadmissible?
I was but told that this conjecture of Copernicus would be allowed to stand as supposition, but must not be defended as certainty. or truth.
And wert thou not commanded not to hold, defend, nor teach, nor even to discuss opinions such as these in whatsoever way?
The passage of 16 years may well have blurred an old man's memory as to the spoken words. But here, the written order from His Eminence says only not to hold, nor to defend. The words "and not to teach in whatsoever way" are not contained therein.
Didst thou receive permission to write this book?
Permission to write? I did not think that writing it meant disobeying the command.
When asking for permission to print the book, didst thou inform the master of the palace of the old injunction?
This I did not consider necessary, for in my book I have not held nor spoken in defense of the opinions of Copernicus, but rather have I sought to demonstrate his arguments to be as yet too weak and inconclusive.
Then he admits to teaching as accused. For what is teaching but communicating new so-called knowledge to the curious mind?
Give me good grounds against my book, and I will put it to the fire myself.
He does defend by trying to destroy accepted truth, by ridiculing Ptolemy and Aristotle, by not refuting heretical conjecture, but rather with new reasoning making a doctrine. He has defended twice.
I searched for truth. If faults or errors inadvertently due to complacency or vain ambition have fallen from my pen, I shall be ready to make corrections at the pleasure of your will.
He does discuss. He claims to speak in terms of mathematical hypotheses, yet gives it physical reality, which mathematics never do. Some of his propositions deny directly the transcendence of the mind divine. What then is this but heresy? Examen rigorosum reveal the truth.
What good would torture serve? An old man stands before you of declining years. What harm or dangerous thoughts could come from me? Dull are the edges of my compass, my vision dimmed by age. I understand what higher reasons brought me here. I stand here to submit. Although I cannot hold my reason from seeing what it sees, I will submit not to affirm that which I know, but to consider it assumption, not truth, but poetry. But even as poets value their fantasies, their dreams, so do I value mine. I know my lot is silence. I know your lights will shine in history long after Galileo's name has been forgotten. But a time will come when others, young and courageous people, bold in spirit and free from fear of unjust accusation, will probe still farther in the outer reaches of the universe and deeper into the unknown. in disciplines as yet unnamed, with tools as yet undreamed. Their time will truly be a time of greatness. For them no truth will go unchallenged, no frontier untried to lift man from his state of wretched misery, of ignorance and fear. They'll challenge poverty, disease, yes, death himself. Yet, even if they find, as well they may, the frontiers forever eluding just beyond their searching grasp, forever receding to the infinite and past the reach of human comprehension, they shall not cease to search and err and fail. Yet they will search again. But no man will set limits to the minds of other men. For them I leave one truth, and thus I shall submit. This truth I know, that only he who understands God's nature understands God's writ. Submitted as you would allow. My time is of the past. Their time will come. Their time is now.
My case. The time is now. They shall not hesitate nor tremble at the edge of greatness.